I lost a parent early on as a child
Oh, wow.
when I was in high school, and I think that sort of set up a path where um, I was really determined to pull out everything that I could from life's experiences and
Mm.
really track down everything that I thought would be fulfilling and every experience that I wanted, and really sort of like tackle life because it's fleeting, and you have to try and make the most of it.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite Airbnbs, boutique hotels, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who have brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, and the real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built chic cabins in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic off-grid and nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Spontaneous, the internet's best destination for last-minute Airbnb deals. You can subscribe for free at spontaneous.com. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy-Cruz, co-founder and CEO of Spontaneous. All right, friends, enjoy the show. All right, we are live. Jeremy, how are you doing this fine day?
I'm great, Zach. How are you? Thanks for having me on. Spend some time chatting.
Yeah, I'm excited to be chatting with you, man. And for our listeners, this is like the third or fourth time we've attempted to make this interview work, and I'm just excited that like we finally figured it out. The internet seems to be holding up so far, and yeah, we're in for like a real treat. Jeremy, you're somebody who I've been wanting to talk to for a while because you have like a pretty cool history in vacation rentals and in prop tech, and you're like an entrepreneur. And I've been dying to hear first, and foremost, obviously the Breezeway story, but also a little bit about like the series of events that led to Breezeway. But one of my favorite questions to ask folks who come on this show right at the top of the episode is if I were to have met Jeremy as a 10-year-old and if I were to have asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, what would he have said?
Yeah, I would have said I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and I wouldn't have known any better. You would have found me, nerding out over some Legos and model trains and a bunch of other toys, and just endlessly playing basketball.
That's awesome. Were you like did you were you pretty competitive? Like were you decent at basketball?
No, I was at 10. I was probably like the shortest person in my class,
Oh no.
and just dreamed of being tall. And I think I finally just wished it into existence. So now I'm like 6'2".
Okay.
But at the
Hey,
time, I was the smallest. I was like the smallest kid.
I feel like fifth and sixth grade are like those are like the weird years where you've got like the giants and then also just like, the midgets. And it's just funny to see how, growth spurts hit people at different ages. I remember like one of my closest friends, he was very, 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 very short in fifth and sixth grade. And then in seventh grade, he literally like it seemed like over a summer. I'm sure it was longer than that, but it seemed like he grew like 11 inches over a summer. It was insane. He came back and I distinctly remember like the teachers being like I'm sorry, who are you? Like he was almost unrecognizable because of just like the dramatic shift.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've got a daughter in sixth grade, and she plays basketball, and she's quite tall. And the juxtaposition between her, she's taller than the coaches, she's taller than the ref. It's really funny.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I we could talk about basketball all day. But I want to hear a little bit more about you and your story. And when I was stalking you, Jeremy, in preparation for this interview, I was excited and also just somewhat surprised, quite frankly, to discover that you studied economics, you studied studio art, you graduated from law school, and then you became a successful entrepreneur. And those things sort of seem juxtaposed in and of themselves. They don't quite fit together as clearly, at least from my perspective. So I want to hear like what the through line is. Like how do you make sense of all of the various things that you've done, that you've studied, the different opportunities that you've had? Like what do you think is like consistent about Jeremy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, uh, I think this happens too. I lost a parent early on as a child
Oh wow.
when I was in high school. And I think that sort of set up a path where um, I was really determined to pull out everything that I could from life's experiences and
Hmm.
really track down everything that I thought would be fulfilling in every experience that I wanted, and really sort of like tackle life because it's fleeting, and you have to try and make the most of it. And so I don't know if law school and being a lawyer fits. That might be the one that like is sort of like a little sideways in that soliloquy. I don't know if law school is like capturing all the joy of life or being a lawyer, but I was eager to just like pursue every experience that I could, and so. Economics was a great, between economics and law, those are two of the main things that like drive human behavior
Yeah.
and drive the world. I did study studio art. My father was an architect. I thought for a minute maybe I wanted to be an architect as well. But I think that the creativity of studio art and arts in general, combined with economics and some practicality, makes for a good background for an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, talk about sort of like one, just, the ability to understand, at least in basic terms, how the economy works, how money flows, why it flows in that particular way. And then also, right, like studying law, understanding, I know that, I don't know if you've like specialized in like business law or anything per se, but like just getting a general understanding of how like society works and like what is legal and like how you can, get around the law when needed. Yeah, that does seem sort of like a very interesting sort of like foundation to then build an entrepreneurial career off of. And in fact, like I do know several entrepreneurs who went to law school, and there must be something about you lawyers where you're like in law school. You're kind of like, I don't know anyone that like loved law school. My wife's an attorney, and her and her friends complain about it all the time. It's still to this day. It's like that was like the worst season of their lives. So I don't know that anyone enjoys law school per se, but it does seem that there's a special type of like entrepreneur who did law school. They just seem more like composed. They seem more thoughtful. Maybe they're just better at like using their words. I don't know what it is, but I have a deep
Maybe.
I've always loved the entrepreneurs that I've met that are lawyers. Like there's just something about you breed of people that I find interesting.
Maybe they're just so happy that they're not lawyers anymore, also. And that seeps through their personality.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Well, I want to talk about Flipkey because Flipkey was, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was sort of like Airbnb before Airbnb, right? You guys were like the OG Airbnb. And I want to hear a little bit about like the founding story. So, where did the idea for Flipkey come from? What were the series of events that led up to launching Flipkey? And then what ended up happening with Flipkey?
Yeah, so I think good friend of mine, TJ Mahoney, had a condo in Boston. He was traveling a lot for work as a consultant. It was sitting unused. He was an economics major as well. We were thinking about, like the lack of sort of productive use of this resource, which was his house, his condo that he'd bought, and how it was just sitting there empty. And we were like, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if you could rent this out?
Yeah.
That was like one sort of kernel. Another, then we started thinking about the sharing economy was just kind of kicking into gear. That was just new terminology. Um, and we debated what we would call our burgeoning marketplace. And we picked Flipkey because at the time we thought it would be great for exchanging any high value asset. If it was
Mm,
valuable enough that you locked it, you would flip the keys to somebody else, and that's how you would share it. And there would be this like easy access and a system for that. And then as part of that search, we realized, whoa, we're kind of boiling the ocean if we try and like help people rent anything for any
Yeah.
amount of time. It's pretty challenging. And I went down to Wilmington, North Carolina to a vacation rental managers association meeting. Um, and they were talking just at this time, HomeAway was also purchasing VRBO, rolling up a few of these listing sites. A little bit of a dogfight between rent by owners and property managers, lack of brand awareness, lack of guest reviews, sort of like understanding, and a lack of a way for people, whether they had one property or they had hundreds, a real lack of, to help differentiate yourself,
Yeah.
showcase that you were really good at it, because there were no third party reviews, and we were like, okay, this is it. This will be like our entry point, which will be third party reviews, help people build some brand awareness and help them tell the world how good they are, because reviews weren't really a thing at that point. And so
Yeah.
while we're doing that, TripAdvisor at the same time was thinking about getting into vacation rentals as a new category. It's really funny. People at the time, I would say to people, "Oh, we're starting this like marketplace for vacation rentals," and they would say, "Like, what's that?" And I would say, like, you rent a house at the beach, or you go like on a ski weekend and you stay at a house. People are like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's awesome." We're like, "Yeah, that's a vacation. It's a thing. There's a lot of them, and a lot of people do it." And people are like, "Oh yeah, cool. Never thought of that." And so then, we decided to do a strategic partnership with TripAdvisor to help grow that business.
Wow. Wow. What a cool story. And it's so funny to think that like that wasn't that long ago, right? That people were like, wait, oh, I'd never thought about like renting a house on the internet, right?
Yeah.
And like booking a place to stay with my family for a week this summer via a website, right? Like this was like truly revolutionary at the time, and yet it's been a while, but it hasn't been that long, right? And this is just obviously commonplace today. Like there's no other way you would book a place.
It's totally true. It's not that long ago. 2010, it was still debatable. Seems crazy to say, but
Yeah,
it was debatable how much people would actually book vacation homes online. And if you think about it from a consumer perspective, unless you're buying, maybe a car, um, but your annual vacation, you know, is typically one of the things that you'll end up spending the most amount of money on.
yeah,
And the accommodations is one of the most expensive things that you could purchase. So turning that into an online transaction, people were not doing that. They were mailing checks at the time. It was really fascinating.
wow, wow, that is so crazy. Um, was how did like so Airbnb obviously they had multiple like starts, right? But like if you really go back, I think in 2008, right around the uh obviously financial crisis, but also sort of like Obama's first campaign that was they made like their like the infamous like Obama O's, right, as a marketing strategy, a way to make a little bit of money to be able to pay their bills. So they were like around during this season, but like did you guys interface at all? Like was there an understanding that you guys were building, and again theirs was a little bit of a different model, at least at the beginning, right? Which was theirs was really like renting a room in somebody else's home. And it sounds like Flipkey's model from pretty much the beginning was like, no, 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 like you're gonna rent the whole home.
Yeah.
Like was there any interfacing that happened, or were you guys like totally sort of in the dark about each other?
I don't know. I've never met Brian Chesky. We knew what they were up to. We thought they were doing something was like really special.
Yeah,
Um, I remember our product manager at Flipkey very early in 2009, probably, talking about Airbnb and talking about some of the really interesting things they were doing for online transactions and booking and search, and what they were doing in the shared room space.
yeah.
And I think we expected they wouldn't stay there, that they would start moving into vacation rentals. But we were really also, as part of being part of TripAdvisor at the time, we were already part of TripAdvisor and Expedia, very focused on the home away VRBO whole home traditional vacation market.
Yeah.
And we were growing so quickly in that space with a lot of room to grow. That was our market. And that's what we were going to stick to. First
Yeah.
professional managers and then owners. And then if we needed to move into shared space later, we could. Um, and I mean, Airbnb is a generational company, really incredible story, and it's just like um, incredible, just like growth that they were able
Yeah.
to pull off. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but like that must have been like such a cool moment, right? Where I mean, you guys are building a product that like by and large is what we know of Airbnb to be like today, right?
Yeah,
And yet like it's so amazing to think about how even just 10 years, 10, 14, and some change years ago, this like wasn't a thing. Like you couldn't book a place to stay through an app. Like you just couldn't, right?
no,
That especially a vacation rental. Like maybe I don't even know if you could book hotel rooms through an app 10, 14 years ago. But probably 10 years ago. I don't know about 14 years ago. But still, like this was also novel. When you guys were eventually aligned with TripAdvisor, what was like what was the strategic like interest there, right? Did they were they already owned by Expedia at this juncture? Is
they
that correct?
were. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So they had owned they were owned by Expedia, and then you said Expedia was rolling up HomeAway and Verbo, which was then just VRBO. So the Flipkey acquisition was sort of just like in tandem with all of that. Like, what was it about Flipkey that you think made sense for the TripAdvisor deal?
Yeah, I think our we were doing something. I think what we were doing with guest reviews
Yeah.
was similar enough to how TripAdvisor was growing, incredibly rapidly, especially back in 2008, growing incredibly rapidly in the travel space
Yeah.
with user generated content and reviews. And we had figured out a system that worked well with TripAdvisor, but was a little different. It had
Mm,
a few unique elements to it around how reviews were managed, how they were collected and sort of monitored to make sure that they were appropriate for someone's private home, right?
yeah.
Usually when you're reviewing someone's home, it is a business, but it isn't a business, right? And so it's a little different than just wide open reviews on the Marriott down the street, where anybody should be able to leave a review on TripAdvisor and just say, this place is great, it isn't. And
Yeah.
it's also a little different, right? Like when you're reviewing Marriott and there's 100 rooms that you could choose from,
Yeah.
there's high throughput of reviews, right? Reviewing an individual home, there may only be 25 people who stay there in the entire year. And
Yeah.
so the volume of reviews is so different. You have to think about the validity of reviews and, yeah, I'll leave it at that. You have to think
Yeah.
about the validity of reviews in a different way. And I
Yeah.
think that's what was attractive to TripAdvisor, and that's what was attractive to the industry. And just a weird sort of historical point, like HomeAway at this point, totally separate company. Expedia buys HomeAway, I don't even know when, but many, many years later. So
Yeah.
Expedia owned Trip owned us, or had a good strategic partnership with us. Eventually, then TripAdvisor separates from Expedia as its own entity. So then for a little while, you have TripAdvisor, Expedia, and HomeAway as separate entities. Then Expedia buys HomeAway, including VRBO, then rebrands it Verbo. It's convoluted.
Yeah, it is. I feel like that whole conglomerate is especially convoluted. Like I feel like depending on who you talk to and like what the year was, people have a very different understanding of like who owned who, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. But to Brian Chesky and the founding team's credit at Airbnb, um, they pursued their own strategy. Never joined up with HomeAway or with Expedia or anybody else to really build an amazing travel company.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it is. It totally like revolutionized the space. What quick last question on this, and then we can move on. But with the reviews,
Yeah.
were you guys doing the whole like, hey, guest submits review, and but the owner of the home or the manager of the home can't read guest review until they leave a review? Was it a dual review system at the time, or was it just the guest that would review the stay?
Yeah, it's a great question. The original tagline, I don't know if it was the first tagline for Flipkey, but it was one of the first, was trusted homes, trusted people.
Mm,
And it was meant to be a two-way review process, where then also your rating as a person would help you establish trust when you went to rent the next place, right? Which was
yeah.
really, really important. So we thought about that early on. By the time we were building tons of things, we scrapped it in favor of just a review on the property. Uh,
Okay.
but that review had to be solicited by the manager and tied into the booking record so that we could validate that it was an appropriate guest.
The reason I ask in particular is that I feel like if in my memory anyways, Airbnb's sort of like review system, right? The way that it worked was unique and novel. Like I've never had another review experience quite like that. Since then, you think of the sharing economy in general. Uber drivers can review. You can review the driver. They can review you, right? It's really just, I guess, rate you. It's not even really a review. But that whole concept of like the two-way review and not being able to know what the other person said about you until like you wrote a review, I mean, that was like totally unique
Yeah.
at the time, right? And to this day, I think is like one of the most unique things about platforms like Airbnb is that ability to wonder, what did Jeremy say about me? you know,
You might,
uh,
you might edit this part out, but I'll tell you quickly on the side. We thought about this, and we actually pursued two different patents. The second one, the one I'm about to describe, we scrapped, but we were really interested in this concept of like vicarious trust.
hmm,
So if you invited me and you said that I'm a good person, my score, my trust score, would be influenced by yours,
hmm,
and I could establish a level of trust even before I'd rented a home, right?
huh,
But if you invited me and then I turned out to be a bad renter, that would also have an effect on your score would go down. So you would only
huh,
invite me and give me a good score if you felt like I was actually going to live up to it, right? So that so that the network effect of trying to figure out ahead of time, because one of the things we were thinking about is like, how do you establish trust ahead of time when
yeah,
it's so thin? It's not a problem for Airbnb now, but I would imagine it was a problem for them at the beginning as well, where like no one has a rating.
yeah,
When no one has
yeah,
a rating, it's hard to feel like you could trust this guest. And again, remember like the mindset in 2008, 2010 is, whoa, how are we going to get these online transactions to happen? The
yeah.
homeowner probably doesn't, it's a lot of money for the guest. The homeowner's never met the person. How do we like smooth out the transaction? And I think probably we were all overthinking it.
Yeah.
And in fact, like it's just such a pain to book a vacation home and not purchase it online, that like the friction of doing that made it so that everybody wanted to do it anyway.
I remember reading an article, or maybe it was even just seeing like a news clip or a YouTube video interview with Brian Chesky, and I remember one of the things he was saying in this interview was, we were just betting early on that like most people like were good, right?
Right.
In essence, like the sharing economy, and this is true of Uber and Airbnb, like any sort of, this is true for TaskRabbit, right? Like any sort of platform that you use, any sort of marketplace like that you use today, where there is a buyer and a seller, a giver and a receiver, especially when it's something as intimate as staying in your home or sharing a car with somebody. It does not work without trust, right? Like money is irrelevant if trust isn't there, and it's crazy in some respects to think that I get in a car very regularly with somebody I have never met,
Yeah,
and they can take me literally anywhere. And I don't know. I really could end up in a ditch, like and yet I don't think twice about it most of the time.
right.
And it's just remarkable what these companies have been able to do in helping us just build trust with total strangers.
Yeah.
And the only way that they're able to do that, at least in theory, is because most people are good.
Yeah, most people are good. And then I don't know, there's a deeper analogy there, probably, Zach, to run back to vacation rentals, which is like you believe that that person is a good driver
Yeah,
because they have a driver's license, right? And so
yeah,
they
yeah,
had to go through some process to get that license. You believe appropriately that Uber did some background check on them, made sure that they're an okay person, um, got some validation that their car is okay, made them take some pictures of their car, et cetera, so that they're trying to control that experience, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, but there's no, a lot of people can put up their homes. Um, there's a pretty low barrier to entry. Yeah, you have to be a homeowner. So that's something. And you have to want to go through it. And now there's more licensing and regulation. We can put that aside. To my point, you really do have to believe that these people are good. And I think one of the things we've learned over the last dozen years in vacation rentals is that most people are good.
yeah.
Many people are incredible
Mm,
at doing this, very dedicated. Certainly, professional managers, they run a giant business, they run businesses doing this, and they are dedicated to their craft of hospitality and delivering on that. But there are some operators who are not great at it,
yeah,
where the quality is, there's high variability in the quality. And I think this is a very interesting time in the industry because professionalism and quality are at the forefront. And we've done a great job getting all the supply together and getting it online, making it bookable. Airbnb and OTAs and even individual property managers have invested a lot in making the search and the discovery of vacation homes and short term rentals much better. So now you can
yeah,
find them, you can book them. But there's still a little bit of a quality issue. And I think
yeah,
now the next step, and we're starting to see it, is like if you don't meet those quality standards, you're just being slowly demoted into irrelevance
yeah, yeah.
as a host.
Yeah. Which I mean, is like actually a perfect segue into the Breezeway story, right? In terms of like in a sense what you guys are trying to do, which is help property managers, help folks who are in the hospitality business be able to have a better grip on their operations, better understand, right? Hey, our respective teams living up to the kind of value and the kind of service that we want to deliver, and if so, or I should say if not, how do we course correct, right? How do we fix that? So talk to us a little bit about, like, after Flipkey, right? You where does the idea of Breezeway come from? Is it really just this recognition that as the industry started to professionalize, there was a dearth of operational platforms for folks to be able to, like, manage their businesses at scale, or what was the opportunity that you saw?
The opportunity was that I thought marketing your home, not just the work that Airbnb had done or, some of the limited success that we saw at Flipkey and what Verbo and HomeAway were doing, but also what vacation rental managers were doing on their own websites, like the
Mm,
professionals were doing on their own websites. Like the marketing solutions for your property, that part of the business was a pretty well-oiled machine.
yeah,
Um, but that consumer expectations, and look, Airbnb was buying Hotel Tonight. Vacation rentals weren't just on TripAdvisor, they were mixed in Expedia and Booking.com. Um, Awareness of vacation rentals was going through the roof. But people really cared about what the experience was going to be like.
yeah,
And we're beginning to think, should I stay in a hotel? Should I stay in a vacation rental or a short-term rental? Urban rentals were popping up. Um, and I knew from my days at Flipkey and working with lots of managers and hosts how hard the operational burden of
mm,
actually delivering on the guest experience is. Um, as I was leaving Flipkey, we bought a vacation home in South Carolina. Watching that be run and seeing how the operation behind that and everything that's involved and the hundreds of points of failure that can happen before every guest comes, it's operationally very complex. And that's the beauty of this industry. That's the magic, but that's also part of the pain and the burden.
Yeah.
And then talking to property managers who used to be my clients and are my friends, I said, how does your maintenance program work? How do you think about asset management? How do you think about property care? And they were like,
Yeah.
they were basically like, it's a disaster. You know, it's a disaster and it's really, really hard. And I thought that like this is an area where property management software systems, it's challenging to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And I figured this is a tough business. It's not super high margin. You can make great money. You can build nice wealth and a good business doing it, but it's hard earned. It's hard work. And
Yeah.
everything you can do to simplify the operation and deliver more on the experience and the service will be a benefit to you. And if there's a good reason for sounds like a very good reason for a point solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Is do you think the reason PMS systems haven't done a better job at like building out like an ops hub is just because of, quite frankly, how different everyone's operations are? Like
Mm,
when you think about sort of like a traditional vacation rental manager, right? They need a website, right? Like, and you think about like the core challenges that a lot of PMSs solve, right? You need some sort of place to like list your listings, right? Some ability, hopefully, for people to book direct, some integration with the OTAs. You need some sort of messaging capabilities. You need some sort of like revenue management tools, right? And by and large, regardless of like your business, obviously there are great PMS companies that specialize in, smaller operations versus larger companies, right? And they've built out tooling with a more enterprise customer in mind, or more of a starter customer in mind. But generally speaking, these businesses, in terms of like the property management solution that they need, it's pretty similar, right? Like people need those tools that I just described. Whereas when it actually comes to operationally figuring out like their business, there's so much variance because everyone's different and everyone has different teams. Some people are wearing 17 hats. Other people, have a team of 17 people where everyone has their own hat. So do you think that that's the real reason why like PMSs haven't gotten into the space, or like that's surprising to me that there isn't a more robust operations hub that's been built by these tools?
yeah, I think they're getting there. I think they are all, well, let's see. Maybe let's rewind the clock a little bit. Back to 2017 when we started doing this. Um, there were PMS systems who did a little bit of this at the edges,
Yeah,
but it's hard. Operations alone is a pretty complex product. Think about all the task management systems from Asana to Monday to,
yeah,
Workday. I mean, and then there's tons of them, and then there's industry specific ones,
yeah,
much like Breezeway. But it's really complicated.
yeah,
And that's a giant piece of software to build for any PMS. And I think
yeah,
they've got their hands full. The PMS business is, like all businesses, is competitive. There are competitive dynamics that they have to keep up with each other. Um, the APIs are changing. The landscape is changing. The functionality and the features that their clients are demanding, just on the reservation side,
mm,
like deeper and deeper functionality on the reservation and accounting side, those demands are evolving and it's a
yeah,
lot to keep up with. Then, so that's a big chunk of work. And then there's just, four other things that they have to be really good at and they have to make a decision like,
yeah,
are we going to be really, really good at all of these things? Or are we going to be really, really good at this, kind of good at this, and we'll lean on partners to help round out our functionality here?
yeah,
And I think they correctly, and maybe, yeah, I'd like to think that in the intervening years since 2017, over the last 7 years, we've made this decision a little easier for them.
yeah,
We're pretty good at this. And
yeah.
for them to be pretty good at it, they've got to invest a lot and they could probably differentiate themselves by investing in other ways.
Yeah, yeah. So walk us through sort of like a core, just an example or two of like how your power users, right, at Breezeway, like what are they doing with the platform? Like how are they actually like using it day in and day out? Because I think we say things like operations, right?
Yeah,
And that can mean like a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
totally. It's a loaded word. I don't love it. I got to be honest. I don't love it. It's really, conceptually you have to think about like it's the work of being a great host or a manager.
Hmm.
Like, what's the work that goes into that? You have a guest, they're going to come stay with you. Think about all the things that need to be done to actually execute on a great stay or a great experience at the property. The property
Yeah.
needs to be cleaned. You probably want to do a quality assurance inspection. You may have to do some routine preventative maintenance. You may have certain tasks that you want to do that are specific to the type of guest that's coming, welcome baskets, notes, whatever it is. Kids are coming,
Yeah.
pets. You may offer other amenities and services at the property, bicycles, airport transfer, blah blah blah. The list goes on, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole list of operationalized tasks that need to happen, and in fact, many of them are tailored to your property.
Yeah.
They're tailored to your business, and then they're tailored to your property. And if you have more than one property, chances are each one is different than the other one, and you're
Yeah.
trying to make sure that both get done in a similar manner to your brand standard, so that they meet this like hospitality level preparedness. So what they're doing in Breezeway is they're setting up automated tasks, they're setting up personalized checklists that sort of self learn about the property so that you
Hmm.
can have a brand standard, and then it can be tailored to the unique aspects of each property. You're setting up maintenance and recurring inspections. You're integrating Breezeway with your locks so that you can then know when the guest has left and you can tell
Hmm.
your cleaners to come in early. So you're setting up all the tasks that need to happen and you're automating that in advance, and then you're watching and making sure that they get done. And what ends up happening, anyone who's a host, anyone who manages any number of properties knows every week is different. The checkouts aren't
Yeah.
always on the same day. You might not be able to rely on the same cleaners. You might have to bring in different maintenance people or service providers. If you have more than one home and you're running a really big business, people are calling in and out sick. Things are changing. Guests are changing their checkout dates. They're staying longer. They're leaving early. It's dynamic, and you need to be able
Yeah.
to adjust to that. So if a system can help you adjust automatically, can take a lot of that burden off of you. So that's a big user story of how people use Breezeway on the operational side. We
Yeah.
have a host of other products, which I won't bore you with all the details, but two of the other big ones. We have a messaging platform. So as the guest is preparing to come, automated communication can be sent to the guest. It can
Yeah.
sync with Airbnb, and be delivered through Airbnb messaging or through your property management software system so that the guest gets a text that feels personalized to them, but you actually automate it and sort of help standardize the experience of it. If they write back, they tell you, yeah, I actually have a question about the fireplace. You can then turn that into a one on one conversation, answer their question, link something to a service task within the Breezeway operations platform, and actually reply to them.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
ton
No.
more, but that's just a couple.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like an incredibly like robust, platform. And one of the things that sticks out about what you said, right, is this idea that everything in this business, right, is so variable. Like I think some of the critique that you hear from folks is like when it comes to automated messaging in particular, people are like, it's just too complicated because it's too different and it's too unique. And today, right, everyone knows when like there's an automated message that's coming in, and like people can kind of discern. People hate feeling like they're being tricked, right? And today, like people are pretty savvy and knowing whether something's automated or not. And so some of the critique that folks have around specifically like messaging and automation there is like it's just too cumbersome to make it sound unique. It's or to make it sound like me, and every situation is just so unique that I just don't want to deal with it. But then in turn they're drowning right in
Yeah.
like in all the people that they have to message and everything that they've got to stay on top of, and God forbid their phone die for 3 hours, right? And they can't get back to people. So it's just it I think for professionals in particular, and as you know, entrepreneurs kind of scale their businesses, like solutions like this are just they're just necessary. Like at least having a baseline so you can rest assured knowing nothing is going to go dramatically wrong, and then of course supplement as needed or as desired by you and or your respective guest.
Yeah. So to that point, we launched in April last year another product called Assist,
Hmm.
where you can pass your messaging response burden off to our team, and a team of hospitality professionals employed by Breezeway will answer guest SMS and telephone phone calls on your behalf as part of
Wow.
your brand. And
Huh.
they will do that within Breezeway so that you'll have a full record of how they answered on your behalf. They'll leverage all the information that we know about your property in Breezeway. um, if it's a routine task that needs to be created, guest is writing in and saying the toilet is dripping, but it's not an emergency. Great. They'll create a task in Breezeway. You can see it the next morning, assign it at your leisure to your service provider. If it's an emergency, our team will call you until they get you on the phone and say, hey, you know what? Like, this is one you need to pay attention to. Like,
Yeah.
we can answer
Yeah.
we can answer almost all of them, but this is, your house is on fire. Like, you better.
Amazing. Yeah.
So it's a combination of how to bring in that sort of personalization. Because I think you're right. People don't like to be tricked, but people also, hey, look, if I go stay in a hotel, really a nice hotel, and they send me a text message the next morning, and I don't care if it's automated or not, and they're just like, hey, Jeremy, like, how's your stay going?
Yeah.
Reply back if there's something we can help you with. Like,
Yeah.
great. I love that.
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
I don't
It
want
just
10 of I don't want that 10 times. I don't want that every day.
yeah. 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 But like it just it shows you that like somebody's aware, like there's
Somebody's
somebody
aware.
that's there, like that's there if you need them, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's a very easy reminder.
If
um
they send me that message and I couldn't write back to that, if it's a no reply text,
ah those are
yeah,
the
that's
worst.
annoying, right? If they send me 10, that's annoying. But think about if they don't send, think about the difference between it being automated or they don't send me one at all, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, send me an automated message. Let me know you're thinking about me. And if make it so easy. Truly, what
Yeah.
I think about that is not whether it's automated. What you've done is you've opened up a really you understand your guest. You're communicating to them in an asynchronous way that's such a light touch, where you've made
Yeah.
it so easy for them to request something and be additive to the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think especially in this market, right? In this category of stay, vacation rentals, like some of the biggest critique that they have is and why like people prefer hotels is being able to go down to the front desk, being able to ask the concierge like, "Hey, I have a problem or I need this or I want this or whatever." That's very very hard to replicate in this particular context. So all the more reason why you want communications that are being sent to make sure people are okay, because chances are you don't have a concierge at your vacation rental that's available 24/7, right? Like that's just true for most people. And yet travelers, right, will people will be more likely to stay in these sorts of accommodations if they can be assured that they'll be treated as if they would be treated by the hotel concierge. Like if that is true, people will stay in vacation rentals, more. And I think the problem is that's 50-50 at best today.
50-50 at best. There's still that variability in quality,
Yeah.
number one. And then number two, like really hard. But I do think this is where the industry is going. A lot more personalization,
Yeah.
understanding more about your guest, and then dynamically changing or um, trying to address the personality of the guest in
Yeah.
how you interact with them and how you communicate with them. Because vacation rentals has done a great job, keyless entry, let yourself in, kind of faceless, right? You
Yeah.
show up and it's pretty faceless and automated. You don't have to interact with anyone, which is the beauty of it. But
Yeah.
building a little bit of a personal connection is also like very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jeremy, as we wrap here, final couple questions for you. One is just around a lot of the folks that are listening to this podcast they're entrepreneurs in their own right? They're building a lot of folks that listen to the show are building like really unique stays. They might be building a portfolio of tree houses or like, a bunch of cool cabins in the Smoky Mountains, right? Like this is a little bit more of an entrepreneurial audience. So I want to hear from you, right, as an entrepreneur, like where do you see opportunity in this space? Like if there's somebody who's listening to this conversation right now and maybe they've built a little cool, unique stay portfolio, but they're, you know, interested in doing something else, or they've decided, hey, I love this industry and I want to build something in it. Like where do you see opportunity for a young, hungry entrepreneur today?
Yeah, I love those unique stays. I think um, a young, hungry entrepreneur in the vacation rental space. I think there will be a lot of, I think I already mentioned personalization, but we're at the early stages. It might not feel this way.
Yeah.
We are still at the early stages of professionalism, quality, and consistency.
Mm,
Um, Tools and new businesses and opportunities to help drive consistency and quality in the vacation rental and short-term rental space will be highly valued in the future.
mm,
Whether that's new marketplaces that think about how do we standardize all these unique, authentic homes and find the common denominator between them and market that in a way
yeah.
that's really interesting to travelers. Like that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
That's different than, that's a little different than what Airbnb can do because they're just so big and there's so much,
Yeah.
they've already inherited this variability sort of dynamic. That's where I would focus. And I would work hard at it, get lots of feedback, talk to lots of people as you're building it, to validate and refine your ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I think that there's massive opportunity in that particular category, and you see some people some people might be familiar with like the 100 collection, which is like I think one attempt to try to do something in sort of the standardization. How do we help ensure that people let's build like a consumer facing brand where people can essentially like rent stays from top property managers, and I think like that's still pretty like niche and very specific. But I think things like that will be very interesting, or or even things like Michael Golden's doing with like Storied Collection, which is a really cool example of like a curated list of castles and manor houses that you can stay in, right? I think that in finding a way to focus on some sort of like niche, find a way to standardize quality around that niche. If you do that, there's just loads of opportunity. So yeah, I get excited about all this stuff, Jeremy, and I just want to thank you for pioneering a lot of this for us, right? Like you were there in like the early days when this concept was of booking a place via an app or via a website was just so novel. So it's cool. Yeah, it's cool to be able to chat with you and hear a little bit about your history, a little bit about what you're doing now. And I'm just excited to continue to see what you do next.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great things. We released a couple new products last year. We've got a lot of great things on the roadmap this year. I think some things that'll surprise people, which is a lot of fun. And I totally agree. This is a dynamic industry. There's a ton of value still to be created. And it's going to be a lot of fun over the next 5 years to see what happens here.
Well, sir, thank you so much for your time. If folks are interested in learning more about Breezeway, I will have links to their website in the show notes below. I will also have Jeremy's LinkedIn profile linked below, if that's cool. So if folks want to connect with you, Jeremy, they can do so via the show notes below. But thank you so much for your time, man. And yeah, just thank you for all the work that you've done to better the industry. I really do think it's better off because Jeremy exists in the industry. So thanks for building what you've built.
Amazing. Thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me an email directly at Zach, that's Z-A-C-H, at spontaneous.com, or find me on X, formerly Twitter, at ZBoozee, that's Z-B-O-O-Z-E-E, or on LinkedIn at Zach Boozycruise. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you, and we hope to have you back again soon. If you've been a listener for a while, though, I'd greatly appreciate if you could subscribe and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you are currently streaming this podcast. Last but certainly not least, Spontaneous and Behind the Stays are totally bootstrapped, and my ability to bring you these stories is only possible because of our incredible advertising partners. We're very much a startup show, and while our growth rate is amazing, thanks to all you who keep tuning in and sharing our show with your friends and family, we haven't quote-unquote made it yet. So if you could do me a huge favor and go and check out the sponsor for today's episode in the show notes below, I would greatly appreciate it. Even if their offering doesn't make sense for you right now, sending them a quick message on social or an email, just saying that you're listening to the show and you appreciate their support would be incredibly amazing. All right, friends, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you on the next episode of Behind the Stays.